You know why it's really important to hunt for old books? Because you find beautiful things that are so much better than the new ones. Like, look at these, Arabella Buckley originals, 1901. Who doesn't want that? Well, hello and welcome back to The Commonplace. I just happen to have these Buckley books here. I'm gonna show them to you again because the color palette is so perfect. And they are out because I was just making a video for Common House, which if you don't know is like Patreon but better, about swaps I'm making in the school year or how I do things like find old beautiful books for school when it seems like all that exists are paperback reprints from today. I'm grateful for the people who are bringing books back. Truly, I think they need to get in front of moms, they need to get in front of kids, but there's something in me, the bibliophile in me, and I think it's because I have a soul that longs for the beautiful books. And so we're actually gonna be talking about books today. There's a lot going on about books. Also in Common House, we've just opened this area for Common House members only to sell their books and buy others' books. I've been selling some of the multiple copies I have of individual titles. Actually, I think there's still a couple left from our last bookery drop. It's called Rascal Bookery because to be a good home librarian, you mother teacher must be a bit of a rascal. Gotta have that twinkling eye mischief about you in order to have a good library. So if you're interested in books, if you happen to like books, which if you clicked on this, I'm guessing you do, please feel free to come join us and you may shop the books. Anyways, let's get started because I owe you a video. So last year, I think it was last year, it may have been the very beginning part of this year, but I made a video about how to build a classical library on a budget, because we don't want to be book gluttons and we need to be prudent and wise. And so it's important to think about how you build a library. You may agree with me and my underlying philosophy that a library is an inheritance that you are gifting to your children while they are in your home, when they leave your home and take your books with them, when Western civilization falls to pieces and you have to help rebuild it. You know, you just gotta have a good inheritance in your library. And that is how I build mine. But in that video, which I will link above, although my links haven't been working, so I'll also link it below. I made the comment that I was about to get some new bookshelves and I was going to be reorganizing my books in this new exciting way, at least new and exciting to me. But I never got those bookshelves. I'm still on the hunt for bookshelves. And so the book project stalled and the books are just basically in a Tetris formation behind me and upstairs, and that's just what we're working with. But I did owe this video, and I know that you were all keeping real sharp tabs on me. And so I wanted to just go ahead and share because this idea is not my idea. In fact, this may be a common idea that I just had not heard about until last year, but I wanted to go ahead and explain it, share it in case you were having a fun summer of reorganizing your books. I think it's fun. I think it's fun to watch people organize their books. I don't think I'd actually film myself organizing books, but you know how some moms watch other moms clean their houses on YouTube? I like watching other people organize their books, although I am a little concerned that so many adults are reading trashy young adult fiction regularly, but that is a conversation for a different day. So let's get started. Last year I was on a podcast called Classical Education, and the host introduced me to the idea, which he gathered from Wes Callihan, who is a classical educator, that there is a way to organize your bookshelf like a Christian. And the phrase struck me, and I was like, wait, what? That sounds interesting, I must know more. And so I started hunting down whatever I could find about Wes Callihan and his books. And the main resource that I found that was actually from him and not other people talking about the idea was a video of him walking through his library, which I will link above or below, however it works out today. And it's very cute to watch classical educators walk you through their libraries. It's like they're talking about their babies. It's just fun. And you get to see what kind of books have they found worthy to invest in, what kind of books do they have multiple copies of, what kind of translations do they like. It's just a really good way to get a good heartbeat about the books you should be buying. So I watched him and I've pulled a couple of his principles, which I'm going to share today and then kind of build out with some of my own about how you organize your library like a Christian. It's a funny phrase, one that I think a lot of people will be like, what? But I think it's an interesting way to think about it, and so I wanted to share it with you. And the very first thing, the primary way you organize the library is you put your books in chronological order. Wes actually talks about, can I call him Wes? Mr. Callahan? Is he a Dr. Callahan? Wes Callahan says that he likes to run his fingers down his books because he's running his fingers over the leaves of time. And I like that because ideas have consequences. That is our first principle here. We do not live in a vacuum. We are not the top pinnacle like all history has been building up to us and we stand in judgment of all things with perfect knowledge. No, ideas have consequences, both good ideas and bad ideas. And to be able to trace those, because your books are in order of when ideas were introduced, of when the gospel was introduced, how that changed things, you can see and track the movement of ideas. I've recommended before The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self by Dr. Carl Trueman. It's a great book. I still recommend it. What's interesting is if you think that a lot of the social issues or cultural conversations that are happening right now that probably are alarming to most classical mother teachers just started in like the last 25, maybe 50 years, you're thinking it's like a generational issue. No. We are eating the fruit today of seeds that were sown in the late 1700s. So when I say ideas have consequences, I do mean it takes time. And knowing that actually keeps us very humble, which is a big part of organizing your library throughout this video, but also helps us be compassionate in remembering that others are image bearers. That there is a reason why people seem to be drinking from this pool of water with the good stuff in it and the bad stuff in it. And it makes sense why people believe the things they believe today that would have never been uttered 150 years ago. You can actually follow thought and see how people have been formed and shaped in good and bad ways. I'll keep saying because it's always both. And it helps you have compassion on where someone is, and then also helps you know what kind of love the idea can I give to them. I don't know if you know this, but reason, according to Charlotte Mason, is a yes man. I like to think of reason as a hype girl. It will confirm to you whatever idea you have already accepted, which is why if you hop on the internet and watch anyone argue with anyone else, you're like, you're getting nowhere. And it's because everyone's reason is taking them down what might be a logical path to a conclusion, but the idea was wrong, the presupposition was wrong, and you just can't make any headway. But instead of trying to tell people why they're wrong or tell them what you think they should do, it's always better to give someone an inspiring idea, because the mind is a spiritual thing, ideas are a spiritual thing, and we Christians should be aware of that and know that giving the best ideas, the most beautiful, the most true, the most good, actually will feed the minds of those with whom you interact. And that is one way to do some good work in the world. So in my podcast episode that came out last week, I am doing this whole little mini series on virtue. If you're into virtue, I'm looking at various angles based on 9 different classical philosophers that I adore. And last week it was Plato, St. John Chrysostom, and Charlotte Mason. They were talking about the soul as a city. And I kind of teed up the idea of using old books, like reading old books, not reading new books about old things, but reading actual old books, meeting the greats face to face, as C.S. Lewis says. I kind of tried to show that it's our inheritance. And I get this idea from G.K. Chesterton. I get a lot of my great ideas from G.K. Chesterton. And he has this essay called On Man, Heir of All Ages, because that is what we are. We are the heir of all ages. We get all of the good, all of the wisdom, and also a lot of the bad, the folly. And when we are aware of that, when we are good heirs, that works to our advantage. It's a tremendous gift to start this far ahead of where these people were when they were writing, because we just can take the wisdom that they've earned, that they've gathered, that they've fought for, and also we can avoid hopefully all of the folly. We can get around all of the foolish ideas that have been tried in every time and in every place and continue to cause harm. We don't need to test them again. We can just learn, right? It's a really great gift. But unfortunately, we moderns typically act more like those who inherit the great family heirlooms, crinkle up our noses, and throw them in the back of the attic, not really wanting to deal with them. But that is not the way to do this. So when you have a library full of old books, you are able to inherit that wisdom. There is something about reading an old book that a new book just cannot do. And it's because you are reading the norms of another time, another place. And so it's almost like a mirror that reflects harshly against you, because it reveals your blind spots to you. It also helps that you can see their blind spots. Like, this is a two-way street. The past is just not perfect. The mirror forces you to look at yourself in a different light, a different time and place, one that you have not been formed in the image of, and reckon with what is good and what is wrong and how you are living. It forces you to ask questions about what does it mean to be human? What are the common things for our souls? What has worked? What hasn't? What has healed? What hasn't? What has nourished? What hasn't? An old library does that and allows you to see what has influenced what along the path to you. Because as a Christian, you are inheriting the story of God's world, right? This is the story. This is what image bearers have been up to. This is our history. And so it's important that we have that. We would never just want to pick up a book from today and think this was the sum of human thought. But we do want to be able to see how things influenced other things. And Wes Callihan gives 2 really great examples. One is that if you were to buy like a great books set, which you can buy, they're usually based on like Mortimer Adler's idea of the great books, you will find there's this huge chunk missing that you were probably taught in school. It's called the Dark Ages. It's not dark, lots of writing going on then. It was just done by Christians. And so in the Enlightenment, which you know I love the Enlightenment, when they looked back at the Middle Ages, they called it the Dark Ages because there was so much Christian stuff doesn't make it dark being Christian. But that then shaped how everyone after them thought of this time period, which is why when you were in school, you probably learned they were the Dark Ages and maybe not that important. And wouldn't you know it, you are now aware that you need to go buy more books because they were wrong and you need them. He also talks about the study of saints' lives, which was a huge part of a library for most of church history. Like, this was very much formative, not just for Christians in the church, but the conversations had in like the marketplace, the social sphere, the social imaginary, the cosmic imaginary. These were more normal. There wasn't such a divide between the immaterial and the material as there is now. And unless you're in a particular Christian tradition, you may not even touch the saints' lives. They may not be important at all to your life. And so you can trace that of this is very influential to all these people in the Middle Ages. The medievals were incredibly important for ordering what we now kind of point to the foundations of the classical Christian movement. That's thanks to a lot of the medievals who were obsessed with the saints' lives. But we don't even know them anymore. What is lost when we don't inherit something? It's insane to think about the things that our kids will never hear, that we will never delight in, all because we didn't know where it fell off the deep end and should be rescued. We need to rescue these things. You need a library and you need to order it this way because you're a Christian and you need to rescue everything that is true, good, and beautiful because it points to God. We're done. Okay, this is kind of already seeped into this one, but you need to read more old books than new books. This is one of my favorite things from C.S. Lewis. It's a great barrier. It's a boundary line that is very pleasant for your heart, your soul, and your mind. You need to read more old books than new books. Now, what's interesting is when you are putting them in the bookshelves. So I am trying to talk about organizing a bookshelf, and here I've gone off into La La Land with the literary life. But what you actually need to make note of, and I've done this in my personal spreadsheet, we have a Kern Bookery spreadsheet because I lose my books all the time when I lend them out and I can't find them. So I needed to keep track of who had our books, who was borrowing them, because I love lending, but I hate losing. And I needed to know when I was out at book sales, if I was at a bookstore, which books I did have at home. I know I have this book, but is it still in paperback and do I want a hardback? Or I know I have it in hardback, but I really wanted this particular edition. All sorts of questions that you need to ask when you're buying books. But when you are ordering them, you have to have these fun conversations with yourself about, okay, this is Beowulf, but Tolkien translated this Beowulf. Okay, do I think that his is pretty close to the original? Because Tolkien, best he tried, was a man of his own time and place. So he might have brought things into his translation that are indicative of being a man in the 20th century. Can I put him in the 20th century? Can I put him further back? What if you have a book that was printed in the 1980s, but it was a reprint of the first edition of a book written in the 1870s? Well, if it's true to the first edition, can I put it in the 1870s? I would. Personally, I would. Now, if it's the 17th edition and it's been changed and molded, it doesn't get to go in the 1870s. It has to go whenever it was printed because there have been changes made and you need to know why the changes were made. It's a really fun puzzle and you get to work through all these questions and kind of figure out what do I want my library to be and how should I order these? Or like if you have an abridged version, do you put them all together because they're not the real book? These are the fun things I do on a Friday night. Okay, so the next thing, and these kind of go together, and I talk about these a lot in my work. If you're going to build a library and you're going to organize it well, you can't be a Gnostic about it. The book itself must be beautiful. Now, that doesn't mean you can't start with paperbacks. Please don't hate paperbacks. I feel like I'm saying this a lot in Common House lately. Don't hate the paperback. It can be a great way to get the ideas in your home. If you're building a library on a budget, it can be a great thing to have if you go on holiday to the beach and you want to throw a book in your bag or you want to write in your book, all sorts of things. You can enjoy them better in a paperback maybe. And a paperback still smells better than a Kindle. Now, if you are trying to build though, the inheritance library, there's going to be something in you, like I said at the beginning, that longs for the beautiful version. And that is because you are not just thinking about how do I get these ideas in the brain, you are also thinking about the form of the ideas. How are they bound? What do they point to literally in their materials? Is this well made? I have said before that if we did not print so many bad books, we could spend a lot more money printing beautiful books. And there are a lot of small publishing houses that are starting to do this and bring books back in print, and I love them. Thank you for your service. But it's important that the book is also beautiful. And I think Wes Callihan actually talks about that too. Like this idea of Gnosticism and having ugly books, you kind of miss 2/3, maybe even more of the actual reading process. It's not just getting ideas into mind. You could do that without ever having to touch or hold something. But we are creatures. We are made to be embodied. We are supposed to use more senses when we are actually engaging and learning in God's world. And so consider having the beautiful book. And it's just something that makes you really happy. You know, you're running your hands down the bookshelf and everything feels lovely and is lovely. Like, it's a treat to the eyes just to have the books there. Because in a house, last thing, if you have a library, if you're building a library like a Christian, you should have more books than you can read. 2 reasons. Number 1, you always have something to read. And there are a lot of people in your home, and a lot of people who hopefully come into your home under your hospitality love, so then they can go through your books and find things they're interested in as well. You should never be without a book to read. You should never be like, oh, I've read everything in here. Look at me. 1, it makes you prideful. You think you know stuff. 2, it's sad when you don't have anything to read. There are people who have a hard time packing to go on holiday because they don't know what they're going to want to wear on Wednesday. I am a person who has a hard time packing for holiday because I don't know what I'm going to want to read on Wednesday. I always take too many books everywhere because I just don't know what kind of mood will strike me, and I need to have all of the books that I'm reading available to me just in case. And so that means within my personal library, I buy through a lot of disciplines and a lot of subjects and a lot of areas of knowledge, because who knows what I'm going to be interested in a year. I go on little deep dives all the time, and I'm sure you do too. Now, the other part of that, yes, you always want something to read, but you also need to be humble in walking past a lovely library of beautiful books will remind you that you do not know everything, and you will not ever know everything. It does not matter. If you read every book in your house, there are still more beautiful books to read, and you're not going to be a master of them. You are not God. It is great if you have read something. It is great if you have engaged with the idea that is what you were made to do as an image bearer, and Christians should be keenly aware of living within the limitations God has given us to flourish. But it does not matter how much you read and how much you study, you will not know everything, and that is just a good reminder. In fact, I was reading part of Ourselves during 2020. Ourselves is a Charlotte Mason book if you're new here, and she has this whole bit about forming political opinions and how you cannot just base them off a single thing you've read in the newspaper or heard on Instagram stories or anything like that. You have to engage deeply with ideas, and you have to engage with them in their context, and you have to understand how that political idea has shifted and changed over time, and why people care the way they care, and why they think this is the utopian vision and why it's not, or what will happen if they do it. And all of that only comes about if you are a student of history and of ideas, and it is kind of your duty as a Christian, as a classicist, as a person. Enjoy maybe reordering your bookshelf this week. I am very excited to do mine once I am able to do so. If you have ordered your book this way and you liked it or decided you didn't, tell me why below. Otherwise, we will continue to be talking about the literary life over in Common House. We will be buying and selling lovely books full of living ideas in there as well, and we would love to have you join us. Links below or above. These technological woes of mine are always increasing. And I am Autumn, and I will see you next time. Thanks for being here.